Yeah, sorry. So my webcam is up there and my screen is down here. So if it looks like I'm not looking at you, it's just because it's confusing for me. Um, so this is I call it my like second and a half time reading Jane Eyre because the first time I listened to it in high school, it was an abridged audiobook. And I do feel very conflicted about abridged classics because on the one hand, I think it's really great because there are like plenty of portions in classics that you're like, do you really have to make it this long? But then I always feel like conflicted marking it as read, like on Goodreads. So anyhow, this was my second time reading the full book, and I loved it. And I just think it's such a great gateway novel for people who haven't read Victorian literature much before. It's written in first person. I know Katie from Books and Things has talked about that also. It just makes it so accessible. And I think also that it's just got such a nice balance of really stunning, beautiful writing, really gripping. It just jumps off the page, but also so many twists and turns in it, and unexpected things you didn't see coming. One trivia I love to tell people, but I have to wait until I know that they've read Jane Eyre, so I can't just share this with anyone. So I've never shared it in a booktube video because I don't want to spoil Jane Eyre. But Charlotte Bronte dedicated Jane Eyre to William Thackeray, and he had a mad wife in an asylum, and so he thought she was making fun of him. And like all of literary London knew about his wife in an asylum, and so they all thought she was making fun of him. And so there actually were a couple letters written between them, and he's basically like, I realize you were not trying to do that. It's okay. Like, I haven't taken it personally. Just so awkward though. But the scene that I had forgotten is so weird. And it just gets weirder like the more I think about it, is the whole time when Rochester dresses up as the fortune teller.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any of the older film versions. I would like to do that. But in the one that some of you might be joining for the movie night on Thursday, or movie afternoon in North America, they don't even have the fortune teller thing because it's really weird. And then in the miniseries with Toby Stephens, they have the fortune teller, but he doesn't dress up as the fortune teller. But I was just thinking about it. It's basically the like, do you like me? Check yes or no scene. But it's Victorian, so you can't just write that and ask someone, do you like me? So he resorts to dressing up as a fortune teller. It's just very, very weird. Yeah, so just a really enthralling book. And also I think it's nice when you go back to a book, how you'll notice certain portions of it, you'll kind of resonate with more. So the first time I read it, I really resonated with the first half, because I didn't know who Bertha was. I didn't know any of that. And then this time I really enjoyed actually the second half. Not that I didn't enjoy the first half, but I just really appreciated it. I think Diana and Mary are great. I just love the contrast of St. John with Diana and Mary. And they're like some sweetness that's in the novel. And I love how she still is friends with them by the end and finds out they're related. So yes. So I guess Emily, what did you think?
Oh, I loved it. Like, I didn't know, because obviously everyone teases me that my favorite Bronte, my favorite book ever is Wuthering Heights. So I thought this cannot really live up to that. Like everyone teases me about the fact that I love Wuthering Heights. I thought reading Jane Eyre again, it can't be as good as it was the first time. And I look back and I rated it like 4 stars originally, and now I'm reading it and everything came alive. It was like I felt like I was going home in this book, and I didn't want to put it down every day. Like, it was just a gall to put it down because it was just amazing. Like the friendship scenes when she's in that horrible place, that school, and when her friend dies of consumption and that, and you like your heart broke for her, literally. And then when she goes back to Rochester and when she goes to Thornfield and you know she's going to meet him, the excitement in us, because we those of us that have read it, we knew she was going to finally meet him, and just her going down her own journey. I loved it so much more this time, and I got so much more out of it, I think. Like, having read so many more classics now than what I had a year ago when I last read it, I was like, I understood it so much better. And I loved it. Yeah, like you say, I loved her relationship with her cousins, and when before she even realised, and that was. But St. John, I just wanted to kill. Oh, I got so angry at him. He was like, "Ugh," such an idiot. Like, and it was just absolutely amazing. And I think I liked the scene where she made up with her aunt, and when she went back there, and they kind of, she basically found out more, and she said her piece with her, and I thought that was really like heartwarming, because I thought Jane rose above what was given to her. You know, they'd made her life hell, and yet she rose above it and went back. And I thought that was just showed her strength of character, really. But there was also bits, like you said, the bits where you laughed at your head off at her, and it was just a proper great book, because you felt every single emotion in one book. I just think it was beautifully written. To me, I love the Brontes anyway, but I definitely think Jane Eyre is definitely the Charlotte's best work by far, in my opinion. It was just amazing. It was brilliant to reread. I cannot wait to see the film on Thursday. In my diary, I'm going to literally kick everyone in my family upstairs or somewhere else that I can read it. Although I might try and see if I can get my 8-year-old to see if she'll sit down and watch it with me, because I'd like her to get into it a bit as well.
Yeah. I think maybe the 2011 one is a better one to have her watch with you, because it's faster paced. You're going to feel a bit of whiplash, I think, when you watch feature film length versions of classics. It's like, whoa,
I've never done that yet.
Fast. What's that?
I've never done it yet. I've got Cranford ready for Jane Austen in July, but I've not done that yet.
Yes. Oh, very nice. Yeah, the part with St. John that really made me cringe was when he said, like, I claim you. Was that what he said?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Like, okay. Cool. Yeah. Oh, so lovely. I'm so happy that it lived up to your expectations of it. But there's no pressure for everyone to like just gush if you didn't, love everything about it. We want to hear that too, because it makes
definitely
discussion more interesting to hear a whole range of experiences. I guess, Hannah, do you have thoughts you'd like to share?
I don't know how many times I've read this novel. I think it was definitely less than 13. It was the first classic I ever read, and I immediately loved it and identified with Jane. And at this point, I don't even know how much Jane shaped who I became, and how much I identified with her then, and saw who I was already in her. But yes, I can't separate myself from Jane. And I've read it very frequently since, and I'm now in my 50s, and this is the first time in probably 3 years. I eventually got my husband to read it, which took forever, but and he loved it too, luckily. So yes, it was wonderful to read it now. I've been reading Middlemarch, which I also love, and feel like Dorothea, the main character in Middlemarch, is another part of me. And someone asked me recently, actually, I guess it was for the favorite characters tag, what character do you love fiercely? And I was going back and forth, and I thought I could use Jane Eyre for every single question, and I almost did it. But in fact, I used Rochester, the fortune teller, as the funny character. So.
I love that video. I did love that video, Hannah.
Oh, thank you.
It's brilliant.
Now, Hannah, I think you could make a really fabulous video then comparing maybe Dorothea and Jane. I hadn't thought of that as a comparison at all, because Jane Eyre is a much more like pulpy style novel. But I think they would be really interesting comparisons, because they both have these kind of false, naive expectations about how their lives will turn out. So that could be really interesting.
Would love to invite them over for tea together. Oh, in fact, I have my Jane Eyre tea mug.
Oh, I love that. I've got to get more Jane Eyre stuff.
Are you drinking Harney and Sons London Fog tea, or a different?
Actually, it's just English breakfast today.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's still fun. All right. And then your username is T. Austin. I'm not sure what your first name is. You're welcome to discuss, but also it's okay if you just rather listen in.
I'll jump in, I guess. I'm Taya Elizabeth, for those of you that I follow, comment sometimes. I have to admit that I did not read this again. I've read it 4 times over the last many years. And in my Penguin Classic, I had all kinds of notes, so I just flipped through the notes again. But it made me want to read it again. I'm always struck anew. The last 2 times I read it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, and I was really reading it through a feminist lensing, which is, I think, definitely there. And when I was going through my notes this morning, this stuck out to me. You were talking about the movie versions. My problem with the movie versions is I always feel like they don't give Jane her due. I would say the biggest difference between Jane and Dorothea is that Jane has more agency. Dorothea has to come into that agency. And I especially, I'll just throw this out for what it's worth, but it's in a scene with Helen on page 68 of the Penguin Classic edition. I had marked it years ago, and Jane says to Helen, talking about wishing she could be more like Helen, but she says, if people were always kind and obedient to those who are cruel and unjust, the wicked people would have it all their own way. They would never feel afraid, and so they would never alter, but would grow worse and worse. When we are struck at without reason, we should strike back again, very hard. I'm sure we should. So hard as to teach the person who struck us never to do it again. And I want to see that Jane on screen. I mean, granted, she goes through a lot more, and this is when she's a child, but I always feel like we have too much romantic Jane and not enough of this Jane, which I think is there in spades. So.
That's very interesting. I'd be interested to hear other people chime in too. I hadn't thought. You do kind of, I think people love the glamorous aspects of Jane Eyre. They go for all the atmosphere and the chemistry that Jane and Rochester have. But I think that's a very valid point, that maybe you miss some of Jane's strength when it's adapted into film. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add about that specifically?
I don't remember the film very well, but I think that when I saw it for the first time, I thought it was a little bit gloomy. And I think that Jane Eyre has humor, lots of humor. And she's not like that, okay? And in the film, everything, it looks like they even didn't put the gypsy woman there, which is funny. So everything that is funny in the book isn't in the film, in my opinion. So I like Jane Eyre because she's funny. She has humor. And her spirit is amazing. So, and for the first time, because I have read this many times, and when I was a kid, I remember that for me that was a very romantic thing. So I enjoyed the interaction between her and Rochester, but I remember that the beginning for me was boring. For example, when she was a child, because that's what I thought it was. What I wanted was that interaction between the two. And this time, then I didn't read it for many, many years. And now I loved everything. So as you said, the second part too, with the cousins, and when she's in school with Helen, I loved Helen, for example, and very, very interesting, everything. So I loved every bit of it. Okay, so.
I always like in the part, when she's younger, talking about the funny parts. I always just like when Mr. Brocklehurst talks to her for the first time and he's saying, Jane, you're such a naughty girl. Don't you know what happens to the naughty girls? And, she talks about, oh, yeah, they go to hell. And he says, well, how do you want to avoid it? Well, I'll just live and I won't die. I'll eat right.
Yes. So funny. Yeah.
It's just funny to see her, and she develops in, religion a lot as the book goes along. I don't remember if the movie versions, talk about the religion much, but I think that's, always a big part in the book there. She's, that's kind of why she leaves Mr. Rochester when she finds out he has the wife, because, she wants to stay with him, but her religion prevents her from doing that.
So you can see it properly broke her, didn't it? Leaving him
Yeah.
and stuff.
Mhm.
I had forgotten kind of the intensity of the scene when the wedding is called off. Kind of like all of the, I don't like use this phrase often because I think it's overused, but all of the sexual tension, it's so intense. And how, just like how deeply they're feeling in that scene. And like you said, Emily, it breaks her and she just has to flee. I do think that's a good point, Christina, about humor being in it. I think a lot of times when there's a story that has, suspense, but also romance, but also humor, like people don't know how to market it as a movie.
Yeah.
And that's like The Princess Bride. It went straight to VHS because people were like, what is this? No, we don't know how to market this. And so I think it's a sign of nuance if there could be an adaptation that shows the humor also. And I do think maybe the newer miniseries might do that a bit, kind of the playful bantering that they have back and forth.
When
But
is that coming out?
What's that?
Oh, you said there's a new miniseries. When is that coming out, or has it already been out for a while?
It was out. Oh goodness, when was it? I guess 2006. It's with Toby Stephens and Ruth Wilson.
Yeah.
Oh,
It hops around between Netflix and Amazon Prime, but also probably would be your library might have the DVD. And also, if you didn't have access through your library, YouTube has a lot of rentals you could do for like between $3 to $5.
Okay.
Might have to look in my library when it reopens, when I get to finally go.
Yeah.
I think the Ruth Wilson character is a little better at showing the humor, but also showing that great strength. And even the really intense anger, especially in her childhood, that seeing her rage seems so important because she serves as this sort of mirror to Bertha. And the rage that she expresses, she learns how to control, as opposed to the rage that Bertha's feeling. And that balance between the two of them, if you take out the rage in the film, it's harder to see how these are alternate choices for women, to the way women will go forward.
Definitely.
Maria, would you like to talk about your experience reading Jane Eyre?
So unlike everyone else, I am not a huge Jane Eyre fan. I read it first when I was 12 and I absolutely hated it. I loved it, loved the spikiness and the passion that Jane Eyre has as a kid. But then I kind of felt as she grew up, she listens to Helen and Helen is so self-abnegating and it's all like, oh, people could do whatever they want and I'll accept it. And Jane kind of seems to take some of that on board. I hated Mr. Rochester, just thought he was rude, excessively sarcastic, he's manipulative, he's even gaslighting her at points. And yet we're supposed to believe in him as a romantic hero. But I reread it because I thought, my views have changed so much since I was 12 years old. I'll see what I think this time around. And I kind of got swept up in the writing and the quality of the writing this time, even though, it's never going to be my favorite book. And there are still things I dislike about it. But I just felt like I could appreciate so much more what Charlotte Bronte was doing. And, the way she structured things, all the contrasts there are between the characters, it's just so cleverly done. I mean, it's amazing to think that, she'd only written stuff that people hadn't seen before and then written The Professor and not got it published. And then all of a sudden she created this masterpiece. So.
Yeah, I do. I think I can see how, Rochester he's kind of awful in certain parts and like, especially to, who is the housekeeper?
Mrs.
Fairfax.
He's so mean to her.
and to Adele.
And to Adele. And so I like that, Maria, you were saying that even with all that, you can still enjoy the beautiful writing. So even if there are certain extremely flawed and frustrating characters, there's still some things about it you can really enjoy.
Yeah.
I guess I like him as a character because of his flaws, or the fact that he's flawed, not as a romantic hero, that he's, part villain here. And he has to get punished before he can get back with Jane. But that idea of having him being the romantic hero was certainly what, especially young girls who were reading this, might go in with. but he's not. He's
No.
definitely a more complicated character.
I think that's what gives him more depth. I think that's what makes it more interesting when you're reading it, because certainly as like an older person now, like reading it, you can appreciate that men don't, like, no one is perfect, and we are who we are with our flaws and everything, and that certainly adds depth to the book, I think, in my opinion anyway. And the fact that he is a bit of a baddie, but he loves Jane so much, and that comes through really.
He's
I
definitely
remember
Oh, go ahead, Nolan.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I remember the first time I read it, for some reason I wanted her to end up with Sinjin at the end of it. And
Oh,
when I
no.
I was in middle school, I think, when I read it. And then, yeah, when I read it later on in high school, I thought, why did I want that to happen? It was such a bad match for her there. And so now I think that, Rochester is so much better for her. So I find it, when I compare Rochester with Sinjin, then I just see, I overlook Rochester's flaws a lot more because, they do have, a better relationship.
Yeah, I do think, Rochester might not deserve her, but like they have really good chemistry. There's this really kind of electric connection between them two. And he says, and I feel really conflicted about the whole proposal scene because he really messes with her, like in the beginning of that scene. But he says, this bond that we have, I feel like we're connected by a string. And if the bond were to be broken, the string would break. So I feel, such a mix of emotions as I'm reading, because I'm like, gosh, it's so romantic. I get so swoony, but I also feel conflicted because of some of the ways that he goes about kind of wooing her.
I'm with Emily. Wuthering Heights is the best.
I agree. Wuthering Heights is my favorite. So
I like you.
Whichever one I've read more recently, that's my favorite.
Well, I do like the writing style in Jane Eyre, but I always think Emily Bronte has a much better style, just for my taste.
So it's so deliciously twisted.
I know.
And you just keep analyzing and analyzing. It's thrilling.
I think, to me, they're kind of like tied at the moment. Jane, it literally gone up pretty close, because to me, Wuthering Heights, I know so many people don't like it. It's all over BookTube that you either really love it or you hate it. But it's so gothic and it's so dark, but it's so passionate and amazing.
The characters themselves, you just you just keep on just trying to get into their heads. Try to figure out what they're thinking, how they came to this point, why they're acting the way they're acting, and you just keep changing your perspective over and over with every read.
I think what I might do is I don't know if you guys are up for it, but maybe next year for October we'll all do, like Emily, we'll do Wuthering Heights as a group of us. Maybe do a Wuthering Heights read something.
That.
Yeah?
I think, I'm definitely in.
Yeah, that could be. What do you reckon, Kate?
Yeah, totally. I just heard somebody read me. She just started a booktube, and this is so bad because I know her. We had been chatting on Voxer. Now I can't remember her channel name, but I'll link it in the description down below if you're watching this on YouTube. And she read me bits of Charlotte's preface to Wuthering Heights. And I'm not going to be able to, put it nearly as beautifully, but there was one piece that really spoke to me where she said basically Emily it was like the story was like a rock that she found on the moors, and she chiseled it and carved it.
Oh my God.
But it was like this story that was, hewn out of stone. And that was such vivid imagery to me, and kind of really evocative of what kind of story it is.
I went to Yorkshire when I was like a child, and it's probably like my sort of heart was there because I'm named after Emily Bronte, and I think the setting is just so beautiful. And I definitely would love to read it with all of you next year. Looks like we've got next October set up.
I think my current ranking is not Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and then Jane Eyre. Emily agrees. Love that. Another top book. One of the best. I couldn't stop reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I read it through my worst academic semester at university. I think I had 12 projects at the moment, and I just couldn't tear myself from that book.
I read it in January and it was just incredible, like 5 stars again. And Bronte's amazing. You'll try Agnes Grey, that's brilliant as well.
Oh, I tried it. I read it first in 2018. It was my first Booktuber.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. So now I've read 2 by Anne Bronte and 1 by Emily and Jane each. I think I'll read Villette next.
I'd probably say The Professor, just in my opinion, but that's...
Oh, The Professor?
Yeah. What do you think, Kate?
I have not tried The Professor yet. I also feel I really did not like Villette or Shirley. I tried rereading them. So I don't feel that motivated to try The Professor.
It's actually, I read it. To me, it was better than Villette by far. And it's better. I found it better than Shirley, if I'm being honest.
Really?
Yeah, I actually found it because it's kind of like Villette, but with more of a male perspective, which kind of adds quite a bit of difference to it. And I think the nuance of it is better. The characters are better in The Professor. And I definitely prefer The Professor to Shirley and to Villette by far. So it kind of goes Jane Eyre, then The Professor. So I would say you can try it, like give yourself time, don't push it, but it is definitely better than Villette and Shirley because I've just finished Shirley and I gave it 3 stars, but it's not like Jane Eyre.
Yes. Well,
I think I'll put that off for a long time.
Yeah. We haven't gotten to hear from Kelly yet. Kelly, would you like to talk about your experience reading it?
Oh, sure. Admittedly, I have not finished it yet. This is my first time reading it. So most of what I knew is from I knew from the other people because a friend of mine, unfortunately, she couldn't make it, but she's a very big fan of Jane Eyre. So she was really excited when I wasn't really reading the book. So I up to the point where she leaves where she goes to she just made it Thornfield. And I'm with Maria where at least I'm just basing it just why her Mr. Rochester where he doesn't really seem like a good character to me. About it all, I was really engaged in when she was in when she was at the schoolhouse. Although admittedly it was kind of hard to get through because recently that same friend and I we were trying to watch Anne with an Eve, similar trauma of a child that's goes through so much trauma. So I was but I kind of enjoyed this more because I feel like and she finds at least before Helen died, she found more community there. She was able to find more fulfillment there with she was learning. She found Helen and then Helen and Miss Temple, and so yeah. My thoughts are very very short because I haven't gotten too far into it yet. Hopefully, I will be able to finish it soon.
That's fine. I feel bad. We've probably spoiled some of it for you.
Sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
I want to comment on something that Kelly said. I wish we had more time in Lowood, with all the community and the teachers. That was my favorite part, actually. So I wish we had more time to build on that.
I always liked in the book when she, kind of goes back and visits people from the previous parts of her life, like when Bessie comes to Lowood and she catches up with her, and when she catches up with Mrs. Reed and the sisters after leaving. So there could have been, some scene later on where she visits Lowood, when she's older or something. I think, because I do think I would like to see more of Lowood, but at the same time, then that would, stall getting to the whole Thornfield, which does take a long time anyway. So maybe something later in the book would be good there, revisiting it.
I wouldn't have minded if the whole book was at Lowood, honestly.
The thing I want to say is that I did how much fire little Anne had. One thing I always remember how when she's about to leave Gateshead, and then Miss Reed said "Oh, you're such a liar. If I was a liar, I would say that I loved you." And
yeah, she's really got a lot of spirit to her. So I'm always pleasantly surprised. Oh yeah, I forgot. She really does have. Someone says she has a lot of agency, and I love that about her. And then Melissa, what did you think with your reading experience?
Yeah, so this was my first time, and I don't know, I don't have really good luck of like not being spoiled for classics, which I don't know how I managed that. So I knew basically nothing. I knew it was a Gothic novel, and that's basically the end. So I'm going to echo that. Like, I liked the first part so much, and I think it was because of Jane's spirit and that she wasn't taking any BS from anybody and was standing up for herself, that I really enjoyed that first part. And then when she gets to Thornfield and Rochester is just such a
I don't mean and controlling.
He was so manipulative that I was like, oh, I could see it coming, like, oh no, is this the love interest? Like, oh no, like, please, Jane, don't. And then I was like happy when like the wedding was interrupted. I was like, yes, she's gonna get away. This guy's a maniac. Like, get out of there. And so I think to me it was like almost like bookended, because I think the problem I had with like the middle section while I was reading it, at least, was that I felt like some of that agency was gone. She was more subdued, and I didn't find her standing up for herself as much. And she was like, just whatever Rochester said, whatever Master said, like that was going to be it. And I was like, what happened to Jane? Like, where is she? But I feel like the end kind of redeemed that. Like, I feel like she got a little bit of that back at the end. Not the full extent, but I guess we're never who we were as children entirely. So I feel like if I read it again, I might feel differently going like the whole way through, because I was like so in love with her as a kid that the middle section was a little bit of a blight. But I think like kind of like knowing the whole story, I would probably read it differently the second time around. But yeah, I just loved Jane as a kid. I would have liked more of that, but I mean, I think the book's probably long enough as it is.
Yeah, 10-year-old Jane would have definitely told both Rochester and St. John, like,
get out of here.
No, I don't know if you've noticed this, but each of them is like, oh, you like the others, like Rochester, oh, you like the St. John guy, and St. John, oh, you like this Rochester guy. And I'm like, had I been here, I would like, bye, honey, to both.
One thing I wish I knew more about, because I've read hardly any Victorian literature, and my knowledge of like societal norms at that time is limited. But I wish I knew a little bit more about that, because I feel like it feels like this was probably pretty radical for its time, like where she's very adamant almost that like she and Rochester can only love each other as equals. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound Victorian to me, but what do I know? But that's another element I think that kind of won me over at the end, was like that she did assert a little bit of her independence back, and was speaking up for herself as being as important to him as he was to her. So like that, it got kind of redeemed in the end for me.
They're even structurally made more equal by his, I won't spoil it too much, but his losses and her gains. So in addition to her personality coming out as strong again, and insisting that she's his equal, they literally are made more equal. And he has to depend on her in ways that he hasn't before.
But I don't think that she was very submissive in the first part.
I agree.
She wasn't. I think that she said what she thought about him, for example, that he was ugly, and that whenever he asked a question, she answered with her own opinion. For example, with St. John, I didn't like him at all, because I think that he was a bully in a way. That those things in when he wants her to go with him, he's a bully, and she felt that pressure and doing what he wanted instead. Where with Rochester, she always as she said, I have to stomp my feet or stomp my foot, isn't it? She even says that. So she always does that. I don't think that she's, so she can be herself with Rochester, where with the others she wouldn't be herself, I think.
I think the outward dynamic between her and Rochester was great, but you know, the inner dialogue, it came across as her like obsessing over him. She was constantly mentioning him, and like Melissa said, like master this and master that. And so it kind of got annoying a bit to a certain extent. So I think the outer dynamic between them was great, the banter was great, but you know, her inner monologue, that just, you know, that wasn't as great.
Teresa, you had started to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, I thought another probably shocking thing for the time was, you know, St. John is asking her to do what probably most of the society at that time felt she should do, which is just to negate her sexual self and to give herself platonically to this person and go out and do good deeds. But she wrestles with herself over that, saying, surely I deserve more than that. And I have to think that was really shocking for the time.
Although I guess I was wondering about that. You're saying like negating her sexual self, because I felt like there was a passing comment that she basically implies like he would want all the rights of marriage if they were married.
He said that he would go with all the forms of love, I think.
Yeah. So I guess I was wondering about that, because I think she was basically saying like, oh, we would have to be intimate, but I wouldn't love him. Like, yeah, I'm really not interested in.
Yeah, she said the spirit would be missing.
Right.
I get the impression she doesn't actually like feel attracted to St. John at all. Like she would probably like fancies the pants of Rochester. even though he's a lot older than her, it's like he fancies the pants of her. But no, I kind of get the impression I wouldn't like St. John. I'm sorry, I was like, no, I didn't like him at all. I didn't think he was portrayed that. Like, you thought at the start he was quite a kind guy and like this guy that was coming to rescue her at the start with his sisters. And then the more I read of him, the more I just didn't like him at all.
Yeah, Rochester is problematic, but you know, St. John is just downright unlikable.
Yeah. Well, it's just definitely like the Heathcliff.
Yeah. I think I've heard before there's a phrase that people of faith use where someone is so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. And I think he is he has this false dichotomy where either you totally care about spiritual things and things that are of eternal quality, and you just don't care about any earthly things, and you scorn enjoying like anything while you're on earth. And it is this false dichotomy, and he's so set on it. But I guess, I mean, he does practice what he preaches. Like he goes for life.
But he's in love with someone, and she knows that. But he's willing to walk away from that. St. John is in love with somebody.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Recognizes
this, but he refuses to acknowledge that.
No, he says he loves her, but she's not. She's not.
Wife wouldn't be happy with him. Yeah. I actually, for those who read Middlemarch, I kind of like noticed a parallel between St. John and the girl he was in love with. I forgot her name, and Rosamond and Lydgate, because he said, because he said, I know I love her and such, but I know I wouldn't make her happy. So like with Lydgate and Rosamond, what if Lydgate actually knew, you know, that he wouldn't make Rosamond happy? How like what difference would it have made? So I don't know if anyone who read Middlemarch noticed that. It just came to me.
Anna, you look like
that particular.
No, I had not thought of it, but that's very interesting.
Although I think that Rosamond Oliver from Jane Eyre, I think she seems far less frivolous. Like I think
that's what I was going to say. She's a better person. Yeah, she's a better person in relation to the other one. Yeah.
Yes.
I need to read Middlemarch. I need to get around to it next year. To read it. Hannah, you really got me wanting to read Middlemarch.
Oh, I really loved it. It is a serious commitment, though.
I think I'll read it over like 2 months. It looks that big. I think it's probably better to go slower on it.
No, I haven't read anything by George Eliot so far, so I feel like I should do Silas Marner or something first.
Yeah,
Adam Bede.
Really?
See, I'd started on Adam Bede and I didn't get on with it, did I, Kate? I tried it like
It's
this month,
okay.
but I felt so guilty. You chose it for me, and it was like, oh, horrible.
There are no book police. Like what? It doesn't like make me enjoy it less. It's just that you didn't enjoy it that much at first. So
I just think I'm probably the wrong place, wrong time at the moment to try and read like a book. I need to probably be like, my mental health's not good enough to kind of be focused on, and I had too many Victorian books going on at the time, so it's like
that's what I think. You really have to pace yourself with George Eliot, and I really am glad I ended up scheduling reading Daniel Deronda with friends last month. And so that was basically, I was just so busy making Booktober videos and everything. That was one of the only books I read in September. And I really loved just getting to really savor it that way. So I still have a good feeling about you and George Eliot, just not in the midst of,
I think
Booktober reads.
I think what I need to do is, I think with Adam Bede, I think it would be one I need to buddy read with someone. So when, like, if any of my booktube friends happen, and I'm going to probably put a video out there and say classics to buddy read, because I think that's the only way I'm going to really enjoy that. Because I think for me, like when I've buddy read with people, it's really helped me to kind of absorb more and bounce off ideas like we're doing in this video, like bouncing off things, and that's made me enjoy them more. So I definitely want to read it. I've got quite a lot of them. So
I'll read Adam Bede with you.
Okay, yay! We'll sort that out for next year. Yeah, brilliant.
Everyone else is welcome too, because this is shameless self-promotion here.
Okay, go for it.
My Literary Parlor book club, we're meeting virtually right now. Usually we meet at the mansion in Germantown, just outside of Philadelphia, but we're meeting virtually, and we're actually going to be doing, in the same month, we're going to be reading The Scarlet Letter and Adam Bede, and then discussing both of them in February.
February works for me.
Oh, I'm in for that.
Yeah,
I'm in for that.
Me too.
Well, can I do my self promotion? I'm doing a read along with my friend Gemma from Read a Book Gem in January, and we're going to do a big read along about historical fiction and like new books. So it's like mixing historical fiction and so out with the old and in with the new kind of thing. And we're going to be reading The Wander by Emma Donoghue, because I thought I want to read like some good ones. But I did pick a classic for this that month, but I can't remember what I said I'm going to read.
Katie from Books and Things, I think, raved about that one. The one.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, that's why I want to pick it up, because my friend Gemma's like a big classics fan. She just didn't want to read Jane Eyre again because she's only just read it, but she loves your channel, Kate, and she's like a big one of your fans.
I love how Gemma. I'll link Gemma's channel down below too.
I would. She's one of my best friends.
I love how she talks about books. I for some reason I hadn't seen her channel before Booktober. I don't know how. And I was like, oh my goodness, she is just so quick on her feet and has really interesting observations to say. I subscribed immediately. She's great.
She's actually one of my best friends but in real life actually now. We've actually met once, and she lives not about half an hour journey from me. And we're going to be meeting up in December. We chat on the phone. We message every day. She's an absolute one of the best friends I could ever meet. Like, she's lovely. And I think, Hannah, you'd love her as well. You would definitely be.
I'd love to meet her.
She would love you guys. Like we talk about Kate and Katie and Tom. She's a big fan of all of us, and Charlie. So other people that have joined in our like community. So you guys would love her. Definitely.
I'm trying to think of, does anybody have anything we haven't touched on in Jane Eyre yet?
I'd like to comment on something that Hannah said when she said that, in the end, like Jane gained some more strength of character, while Rochester had some losses. So it was, the dynamic between them was balanced. So, it struck me like what would have been had Rochester, had his wife died, but without, the blindness and, the loss. If he had been still the same Rochester that Jane first met, would the ending have been different? What do you think?
That's a good thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think she would have. I'd like to think she. I think Jane certainly would have stood up more to Rochester at the start, and I don't think it would have kind of happened the way like she might have guessed what was going on with him. I don't know. It would have been quite interesting.
And even besides the physical losses, I wonder if just because he seemed so devastated with the loss of her when she just ran off without saying goodbye. Wonder if that was enough to like bring him down a peg or two, that to like rebalance that dynamic as well.
He needed to be knocked down a peg or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely
Desperately.
seems subdued at the end, a bit.
Yeah.
To realize what a huge mistake he had made, what a terrible thing he had done that caused his downfall in a lot of ways.
I think for me, the disability issue of it at the end was really interesting, because I've only got one eye that works. So to me, when he lost his sight, and it kind of made him rethink about, you could see him really like looking through his eyes. And yes, at first he was a bit pom-pom, feeling sorry for himself and stuff, but I think it made him certainly rethink what was important, really. I think that's quite a nice idea, and I think the way Charlotte wrote that sight loss was done beautifully. It was amazingly done.
It was, and I'm wondering, did she know someone with a disability in her life? Because I think there is a lot, actually. Katie from Books and Things has done wonderful videos on the disability representation in Victorian novels, and a lot that's like super offensive. And it's just like, you seem like you don't actually know anyone with a disability in your life. So that does just make me curious, and she goes about it with such sensitivity and showing, just he's still this full character and human being, even if these things that when you first see look so different than maybe other people that you've seen. It's really remarkable.
I think he's so badly sort of, to me, Charlotte could have really written it down like, poor him, and he's like, everyone's going to work, like, feel sorry for him and do everything for him, and really like, people like always pity you. Like when I lost my sight, people pitied me so badly, and it was like, oh, poor you can't do this and you can't do that, and I was like, I was going to prove you blooming wrong. And I like the fact that they show that, to me it was like that came through, that he was like, no, I'm still going to do stuff, and Jane kind of supported him and encouraged him to still do everything. And I think that's really important to show, and that's something that I don't really hear very much talked about in Victorian literature. So yeah, I think it was done very well.
Wasn't Charlotte herself losing her sight or something? I feel like I heard
At
once
the end,
that she had really bad eyesight.
Her father lost his eyesight over a prolonged period until they realized it was cataracts, and he had to go for an operation.
How old was she when she died?
Could they successfully operate on cataracts in the Victorian era?
Yeah, and like he had the operation with anesthetic, wide awake.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know, it's quite, it's pretty difficult when you read about it, but I think it kind of happened over 3 or 4 years, and he was basically blind at one point. And then they had to operate on one eye. It done in Manchester, so they had to travel over to Manchester for stay there for a bit to recover, and then he had to go back to get the second eye done.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's something I'm actually really comforted when I read about the lives of Victorian authors and people in the Victorian era. As a person with a chronic illness, like, here are all of these people who they were just tough. And so I think it's just really encouraging. Like, you can feel discouraged, you can feel kind of defeated, but like, you can't let it break you. And just seeing, it's really inspiring, and Elizabeth Gaskell, I go on and on about her. She had just terrible chronic health problems, and she never really got any answers. And she would have periods where she thought she was all better and would get so excited. And even up until right before she died, the last letter she wrote her husband was, I feel better and younger than I have in 10 years. And you just think, well, I'm like questioning my productivity that I haven't written any books yet.
Yeah, see, that was something with me and you got first started chatting about, Kate, wasn't it? Because obviously both of us have chronic health problems. And I remember like hearing that, and to hear, and I've always said to you that something that's inspired me when my chronic health has been at its worst is to read about the history and to read about people that have had to battle through it. And it reminds you that if they can do it, then why are we moaning? Kind of, we just need to get on with it. So it's quite interesting.
I think you mentioned it. There was one moment where Helen was talking with Jane, where she was punished as she wasn't listening in class, and I said sometimes in my mind I just drift off unless it's something interesting. That makes me think because I have ADD, and that happened to me a lot when I was elementary school, even now, or sometimes I'm like listening, where sometimes if I'm like kind of tired, if I'm just not interested, and my mind would just like float off to like who knows where. So like
That's true.
Oh, that's a really interesting take on Helen because of all the problems that she was having, and like she was leaving her stuff untidy and was constantly punished for all of these minor infractions, really, where that's an interesting take on her.
That's something we hadn't thought about. I never thought about that.
That's why book discussions are so cool, because we didn't see it through your eyes, Kelly, and so that's really interesting.
It's lovely.
It makes me have like all the more compassion for Helen. Like, I don't think it was for lack of trying, you know, that she was missing things in school.
I liked Helen. She was lovely. I was gutted when she died. I was so upset.
This line that I can't remember if it's in the book, because I've seen the 2008 or 2006 miniseries so much, that's so intense. After Jane wakes up and Helen has died and they're carrying her away and she says, "God can't have her." It gets me like every time. Oh, and she's so young.
Is that going to kill me if I watch the film? Is that we're going to have anything like that in the film? Am I going to be crying?
Yeah, you need
Okay, so basically it's a case of getting the tissues down and chocolate for Nana.
Yes. This has been so much fun. So thank you everyone for contributing different discussion points. And yeah, it's really, I always feel like makes me enjoy a book even more, kind of wrapping it up with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we do that? Can we do that like more often, not just during Booktuber? I really like that. You know,
I want to do more. Yeah, no.
Maybe should we do it for your Adam Bede one, Kate? Would you be comfortable doing a Zoom thing for your Adam Bede in February? Because then that's not too long away.
Yeah. I think I've got to record a video. I was going to anyway, kind of showing the lineup for Literary Parlor, because we're not meeting in person. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll meet in person in May. But that means all of those months up until then would be virtual and accessible for everyone.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's been lovely. Thank you. Like I couldn't, this is my first time doing a read along with Kate, like my first time doing it on my channel as well. And it's been, to me, it's been really amazing. And all the support of everyone's been so encouraging. Thank you all for being so lovely. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
To see everybody.
Weekend, that was last week of October.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.